Perfect. So just real quick about Master Gardeners, what we do is the program engages university trained volunteers, and we want to empower and sustain a diverse communities with relevant, unbiased, research-based horticulture and environmental stewardship. So of these 9 program priorities, what we're learning about tonight includes things that have to do with clean water. So, integrated pest management has to do with clean water, soil health, and pollinators. So, of our 9 program priorities of the program, we're covering 3 just by listening to this presentation. So, okay, just quickly, the scope of the presentation, what we're going to do is we're going to cover a step-by-step approach to managing pests that you guys can follow before considering chemical interventions. And this is something I pretty much do every day. What we're not going to cover today is pesticides, which pesticide to apply for a particular issue. I'm not going to talk at all about that. I do have some resources, though, that I can pass on to you where you can, that they're very reliable resources so that you can get your answers that way. So what we're going to learn today, the basics to reduce general plant stress. And we're going to start there because pests attack plants that are under stress. If they're in a drought situation, I'm talking like forests and things like that. We have now the emerald ash borer, and it's a horrible, horrible bug that has migrated across the United States, and now it's attacking all of the native Oregon ash and other ash species. And the ones that are under stress are getting attacked first. Eventually, they probably all will be gone because the population will completely overtake the whole species, and it's really kind of a scary thing. But what we want to try to do in our own gardens is reduce that plant stress so that the pests will be minimized in the very first place. So we're going to talk about that first. Then we're going to talk about how we diagnose an issue and establish a tolerance level. It's not reasonable to believe that we would have a garden and have 0 pests. So what we want to do is establish how much pest pressure can we handle before we take action, especially when we're taking action with chemical applications. So we just want to establish that because insects, for example, one of many pests, are really great. Most insects are very beneficial to your garden. So we'll talk about that. Then we go right into the 3-step approach of integrated pest management. It actually is a 4-step approach, but I am deleting the last step, which is chemical application. And that's kind of like last resort. If the tolerance level then is still exceeded, you can decide if you want to utilize that 4th step of the chemical application. Okay, so as related to plant stress, what we need to understand, there's a disease triangle. So you have to have all 3 factors in place for there to be a pest or disease. You have to have a susceptible plant, you have to have a conducive environment, and you have to have the pathogen or insect present. Okay, all 3 of those have to be in place for the disease or the infestation to occur. By making efforts to make the plant less susceptible or the environment less conducive, we can actually more easily manage the pest or the disease. So if we manage the susceptibility of the plant or the environment, we can then manage the disease. We do need to realize that most problems are not pests, but are problems that make the plant more susceptible to the pest or the disease. Okay, this creates that opportunity for the pest. So we need to kind of determine, why is this plant stressed in the first place? The first thing we look at is right plant, right place. What we want to do is we want to plant a plant that's appropriate for a certain location. Or if we have a certain location, we want to find a plant that's going to be able to survive happily in that location. So you can start, let's say I'm at a plant sale and I have a plant and I want to plant it somewhere in my yard. I need to figure out where's the right place in the yard. I just don't want to roll the dice and hope for the best, right? That's probably going to end up with some disease, pest infestation, something like that. So by selecting the right plant and putting it in the right place, we're going to promote a healthy and vigorous plant. We're going to reduce maintenance. That plant will establish in the garden quicker, and then that's going to prevent insect problems and diseases. We're going to end up eventually saving resources like water, fertilizer, our own time and energy. So if you hear yourself say, oh, it should be fine there, let's just try it there, please rethink your decision. So let me go back to this real quick. In this picture here, I have two pictures of the same plant, basically. This is a rhododendron, very common in the Pacific Northwest. The top photograph shows the rhododendron and the leaves don't look very good. That rhododendron is in full sunshine. Rhododendrons are actually happier with some shade. So if you look in the lower picture, now I admit in the bottom one that's blooming and in the top one it's not blooming, but you can see in the top photograph, those leaves are sunburned. And that happens when it's in direct sun. Rhododendrons are not supposed to be in direct sun. So that's one example. Put your rhododendron where there's a bit of shade. Sometimes what happens is a rhododendron will be in your yard and you'll have some trees, but then those trees might be removed. Now, all of a sudden, that rhododendron's in full sun. It's going to be very stressed. It's probably going to get all sorts of pests and diseases, funguses, things like that. Okay, so you can start with the location. If you get a lot of sun exposure, you're going to need a plant that likes a lot of sun. Look at your drainage. Is it a place where water sets? So you're going to need some plants that like a lot of water. Or does it drain really nicely? Okay. Does it get foot traffic? What kind of wind exposure? Do you have kids that are going to be trampling on it? Do you have pets or do you have deer? So you want to maybe choose some varieties that deer don't like as much. Is there heat that's going to reflect off of hard surfaces? And then what about the infrastructure? Do you have a sidewalk next to it? Power lines? Please don't plant trees under power lines. I see that all the time, and it's pretty funny. Now, in these pictures, this is lavender. Both photographs are lavender. In the top picture, you've got lavender that's sitting in front of a whole row of grapes. Now, grapevines require a lot, they do require more water. I think it's grapevines. The message here is that lavender in the top photograph is getting irrigation. Lavender doesn't like irrigation. Lavender wants to be dry in the summer. So in the photograph in the below part, the lavender is happier because this is not an irrigated area of a yard. So that's where lavender wants to thrive. I've seen a lot of people that plant lavender because they love lavender, but they've got it in an area like right next to a hydrangea or something that requires a lot of water. So we can also look at, let's say you buy a plant. We want to look at what the plant's needs are. What kind of light does it like? So you're going to have to look in your yard and see where's the best sun exposure that matches that requirement. How about water? Does it need a lot of water? Is it going to need irrigation in the summer? What kind of soil does it need? Loose soil that drains, or does it like a lot of nutritious clay? And then we've got hardiness. Our zone happens to be zone 8A or 8B. and the temperatures get pretty low. So if we want a plant to survive, we've got to make sure it can survive down to 8A or 8B, depending on your specific zone in the county. I had a guy today say, I'm going to plant an avocado tree. And I thought, why would you do that? Because that's not going to survive. That's not a plant that should go in zone 8A or 8B. You also want to look at size at maturity. If you're going to plant a plant that's going to end up being 60 feet at maturity, make sure you're putting it in a place that can handle something that's going to be 60 feet. Yeah, because you don't want to be pruning it all the time. Pruning causes stress. Sometimes we have to prune, but every prune cut is an injury to the plant. So make sure you are researching your plants. Look at the label. For example, we learned from this label right here, this Mahonia label, that it requires shade, it needs well-draining soil, it grows 3 feet tall in 5 years, it's hardy down to 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which is perfect for our area. It has light yellow flowers in the fall, and occasional water is needed in the summer. So we learned a lot just by looking at the label. We can also research using books and the internet. It would be awesome, wouldn't it, if we just landed in a blank slate yard and were able to design from the beginning. If you do happen to be so lucky, what you want to do is design by grouping your plants with the same water needs together. For example, in this plant, over on the left, this is like a little desert zone, okay? So they've probably got different types of succulents, definitely drought resistant species that they're not even going to need to irrigate that area. Whereas over on the right, they're now going to put over here things that do require a lot of water, but they're putting them together. So when the soil gets dry and they're going to apply irrigation and start watering, everything there is going to need water and it's going to get water. So don't put a succulent next to a hydrangea, for example. Okay, this is something we learned at WSU, and it's actually working out really well. There used to be an old way to plant a tree, and I see a lot of people still plant their trees this way. In the picture on the left, the mulch comes up to the top. You see that, and it touches the trunk. In the picture on the right, the mulch is formed like a donut around that trunk. That you don't want the mulch touching the base trunk of the tree. The root collar in this picture on the left. Did I get my right and left mixed up a second ago? I think I may have. So the picture on the left, the one with the red, that means don't do it that way, as in red, stop. The root collar in this example is buried below the soil line. When you purchase a tree, the root flare, so the trunk comes down and then it flares out. That very beginning of that flare should be above the soil, okay? So the picture on the right, the green means go. The root collar is at the soil height, and that is correct. The old way, a lot of people just take that pot that they buy from the nursery and they dig a hole exactly in the shape of that pot and they just pop it in. That's not the best way to plant a tree. What we want is we want to loosen all those roots, may even have to trim some off, and then spread them out as if it's a bare root tree. If you've ever purchased a bare root, roses or berries, things like that, what those are is they're packaged with sawdust, and you take the sawdust away and you bury more of a shallow hole, and then the roots spread sideways, because that's the way the plant would be growing if it were basically growing from seed. So we're trying to mimic that more natural way of the root structure when we plant that. So, and we have a whole class called Sustainable Landscaping where we describe these types of things even more. But because this is supposed to be focusing on integrated pest management, I'm just going to breeze past this. So especially with trees, what we want to do is stake them loose and low if necessary, and then you want to remove the stakes within 3 months. Staking is you're compensating because the tree is new and we get that, but what that tree needs is to sway with the wind, and that's what's going to build up the strength of that trunk. So you want to get it swaying as soon as possible. Water it thoroughly and frequently until the roots are established. So that first season, definitely going to need some water in the summers for sure. And then surround it in the donut shape with some nutritious mulch, for example, leaves, composted manures, and then my favorite being arborist wood chips. I use arborist wood chips for everything, and they work great. Yeah, just mulch out that drip line. Okay. Okay, some quick pruning basics. Proper pruning is going to create aesthetic landscapes, and over time, it will reduce the need for chronic maintenance. Okay. It increases air circulation, which is going to cut down on fungus disease. So that it is important to make sure we keep things pruned and loose. The timing, we always want to prune any dead or damaged or diseased branches. So those always have to be pruned. We always want to prune suckers or sprouts. And you can see in this photograph, this is a plum tree. Plums and cherries are very prone to suckers. What happens is the top part of the tree starts getting old and diseased. And so it's the last ditch effort for this poor tree to try to survive. And it's trying to basically put out new trees. But there's a problem with the tree. And so those should be actually pruned out. And try to only, the best time to prune is late fall. Spring is okay, but definitely don't prune in late summer. Keep your tools very sharp and disinfect them, and then try to only prune up to 30% per year, never more than that.
Janice, we had a quick question in the chat, if you don't
Yes.
mind.
Yeah.
They said, I have some little red buds that still have stakes and strings from when a local nonprofit planted them quite a few months ago. Should I cut them loose?
I according to this source that says yes, cut it loose within in 3 months, then you would do that. I don't know the circumstance of that
Mhm.
tree, so I would hate to say yes, remove them, and then have a windstorm come and blow it down. So if it's super weak, you may want to also check with the people who planted it and gave you those stakes and see what their recommendation is.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so yeah, physiologically speaking, late fall is the best time. There's less disease, there's less sprouts. You can see better because the leaves are gone on your deciduous trees, and there's less bird disturbance. I don't like to prune in the spring for that reason too, because the birds are nesting and stuff. So um, just remember there should be a reason for every cut. Either the branches are rubbing, there's broken branches, disease, you've got to clear it for some air. For large or mature trees, please hire a certified arborist. They know what they're doing. Here's some examples of some cuts that are not correct. Over on the right, it says wrong. This is too close to the bark. It exposes too much surface area of the tree. So it creates a larger injury. The one below it is also wrong because you've left too much of the side branch what's going to happen is behind it you might get a lot of growth, and that's not correct. So you're actually defeating your purpose of pruning. What you want to do is over on the left side, minimal stump, right? And then not too much of that stem, that side stem is remaining. So we want to avoid flush cuts. Those are difficult. That's where you're right up against the main stem. Very difficult for the tree to heal those. And then that opens it up to pests and disease. Stub cuts, that's where you cut, but you don't cut all too, you don't cut close enough to the center. And then you're going to get all sorts of new foliage. So that's depicted in the photograph in the center there. They left part of the stub. I don't know if you can see my mouse. Let me see. So right here, too much of the branch was remaining. And then boom, what pops up? 1, 2, 3, 4 new branches, completely defeating the purpose of what you were trying to do. So this branch, instead of being cut here, should have been cut back here. And then heading cuts, that's shown in this example here on the right. Very unhealthy for the tree. The tree has a very low ability to survive these types of cuts. If it does, it's going to be extremely prone to disease. So here's some signs of stress. Exposed roots. So you got roots that are coming up to the surface. The suckers, as I explained earlier with the cherry and the plum trees. Maybe we have leaves wilting or distorted. Leaf chlorosis, that means they've lost their color and they're turning yellow, and it's not fall. Leaf surface damage. What we need to realize with a lot of these things is that plant stress is caused by abiotic issues. This is not a pest. The plant may have been planted in the wrong location. That plant you selected, just, for that location, that wasn't the right plant. Maybe some over amendments occurred. A lot of times we like to add all sorts of amendments to our native soil. Usually it does not need it. If you're going to add some soil amendments, you should probably have a soil test done first so that you know what you're doing. I mean, and the soil test will probably come back and say you don't need to do that. So just save your money. Or over fertilization. As a last ditch effort, we're like, let's give it nitrogen. Maybe we tilled too much organic matter into the soil. This caused a lot of nutrients, and then it's also going to cause soil subsidence, and then the water goes all there and maybe drowns the roots. There's all sorts of things like that. Improper pruning, soil compaction. So maybe it's a tree, but you now have a path right next to where the roots are going. That's affecting the tree. And then maybe poor drainage. So those are all things that have nothing to do with pests, but they're causing problems with your plants. Help is available. Just have to realize 80% of all issues are cultural, and it's the growing conditions that need to change. Don't assume it's an insect. And let's see here. For information, go to blah, 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 blah. We have a community, a clinic, a Master Gardener answer clinic. Best way to get an answer from them, and I've used them all the time, usually because like friends and family, they're like, oh, you're a Master Gardener. Here, I have this problem. Tell me what to do. And I'm like, I don't know. So I just ask the clinic. They give me the answer. I give my friend the answer, and I look like I know what I'm doing. Anyway, so yeah, ask a Master Gardener at clarkmg.org. That's the email address, and you can email them your plant issues, and they will get back to you with a really nice answer too. Very thorough. Okay, now we're moving on to the integrated pest management. Any questions on plant stress?
There's nothing in the chat currently, but if anyone has a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat.
Yeah, and we
I'm
can ask
thinking.
it,
Mhm.
answer more questions at the end too.
Yeah.
Okay, so integrated pest management, it's a sustainable, science-based, step-by-step approach, and it combines cultural, mechanical, biological, and chemical tools to first you want to do is identify and then manage. And notice we say manage here, we don't say eliminate. So we're manage and reducing the risk from pests in a way that reduces economic, health, and environmental risks. So pretty big definition there. Um, this triangle shows it's kind of like that food triangle. You're supposed to eat more of what's on the bottom. And so you start with prevention, which is all the stuff we just talked about. And then when you identify an issue, we then start with cultural changes. And then we move to physical and mechanical changes. Then we move to biological and eventually, as a very last resort, chemical. So, some benefits, it's going to be less maintenance, less work, lower maintenance. I'm all up for that. It can be more cost effective. We're going to reduce our exposure and everybody's exposure to pesticides. We're going to provide habitat for wildlife and beneficial insects. And then we're going to protect the environment away from our property, including streams, wetlands, rivers. So those are those are very important benefits. Okay, so what is a pest? Insects, that's what everyone thinks of first. We also have mollusks. That's going to be Mr. Slug. We have funguses. We have bacteria and viruses. And we have herbivorous mammals. Those are considered pests, as well as weeds. So let's talk about some of these items. Okay, can anyone identify? So now we start the quiz, right? You can put your answer in the chat. Anyone identify what pest, what insect this is? See if anybody chimes in, if you can see the picture closely. Believe me, everyone has these. There it
I'm
is.
saying
Sherry
aphids.
says aphids. Exactly. So these are aphids. You got black aphids, you got green aphids, pink aphids. Depending what they're eating, they change color. So what do we do with aphids? Let me just get it. Oops. Here we go. Okay, we want to start with some cultural methods. Assure that our plants are healthy and that they are getting consistent watering. Avoid excess fertilizer. And the reason we want to do that is because fertilizer causes a lot of brand new green growth that aphids are just super attracted to. They like that soft tissue that occurs when we get fertilized plants. We can also time the planting of our harvest, if we're talking about vegetables now, to avoid peak aphid season. For example, in this lower picture, there's some broccoli over on the left. That's the purple broccoli, and it still has frost on it. So broccoli is a plant that loves cold weather and in the winter. And that's something we can do. We can plant that during the winter so that there's no aphids in the winter. So we're going to eliminate remember that disease triangle. We're eliminating the pest by changing when we're going to plant that. Another thing we can do for mechanical, so we're moving up that triangle mechanically, we can spray with a heavy hose or soapy water. Just spray them off, right? That's what I love to do with my aphids. At the farm, we do get aphids, especially on certain types of vegetables like cabbage, those types of things. They love it. And so we set the hose up right at the beginning of that row, and then when volunteers arrive, someone knows they've got to go down the row and spray off all the aphids. So that's the main mechanical way that we use to get rid of our aphids, manage our aphids, I should say. Um, Biologically, we want to provide a suitable habitat for some natural predators, right? The lady beetles, what people call ladybugs, lacewings, wasps. Wasps are such a gift to a garden. Let me just tell you, I know people have a aversion to wasps, but they are a huge gift to the garden. And so, what we want to do is provide water and sites for egg laying, in other words, leaves and twigs, hollow trees, for those beneficial insects to thrive as well in our garden. They'll take care of the aphids.
Okay,
Okay, here's
thank
the
you.
next one. The next insect. Someone asked, how often do you spray water for aphids? Daily, weekly? It really depends on the infestation, how many there are. Yeah, I would say if you're heavily infested, you're going to probably need to do every day. If it's not so bad, less. So, yeah, there's not really an answer for that. Um, okay, who? Oh, you're welcome, Michelle. Who can guess this lovely critter? When I put these three, they're three different ones, but they're very similar in what they attack here. I don't know if anybody wants to guess these, if you've seen these in your garden. Okay, I will just let you know. If you grow cucumber or squash, you are going to see these animals, these insects once in a while. So the cucumber beetle, those are the two over on the left side. We've got a spotted and a striped. And then on the right side, we've got that's called a squash bug. And that's guys a little bit bigger. They are, they can be devastating to a vegetable garden. And it's really sad because we have some community plots over at Heritage Farm too. And this year wasn't so bad, but last year was a banner year for these guys. And so many people had to just get rid of their plants. They were so infested and they just had to uh, give it up. No zucchini anymore. So I think I see a question. I'm going to answer that last. That's from Steve. We'll talk about that. That's actually going to come up in a bit. Um, okay, so culturally, what can we do to get rid of these guys? We can delay our planting. They're actually very prolific in the early spring, and that's when they lay. The larva is active and then it goes to the bugs. So if we delay our planting, they won't have much to eat. If we delay it to mid to late June, we can install row covers as a physical barrier, as pictured in the photograph on the left. And then make sure we keep our plants healthy. I noticed at the farm when we did have an infestation of those, the ones that the insects attacked, the plants attacked, were the squash that was the kind of weakest, so to speak. So try to keep those healthy. Mechanically, we can catch the adults with a stake that's covered with petroleum jelly. So in this photograph on the left, you see a beetle there, but that's not the beetle we're after. But the stake, the yellow stake that's up in the corner of that photograph, what we do is we take petroleum jelly on those stakes and we just walk around in the flowers and we just start grabbing them and they stick to the jelly. Then we put them in a bag and dispose of them. We also have a battery operated vacuum known as a dust buster. I didn't want to use a brand name here, but and we catch adults with those. It's pretty fun. And then they're in the little capture cavity thing, and we just leave it in the sun, and the next day they're all dead. So that's a mechanical, those are examples of mechanical removals. Biologically, what we want to what we want to do is make sure we avoid any broad spectrum insecticides that are going to kill their natural predators, such as soldier beetles. That beetle there in that third photograph on the right is a soldier beetle. And what they do is they eat the larva and the eggs. And so if you've got soldier beetles out there, you want to make sure you're not applying insecticides that are going to kill the soldier beetle. Okay, what's this guy? Anyone want to take a guess at that? A lot of these things okay, moth, it's true. Um, this is also known as the cabbage white butterfly. Yes, Carrie guessed the cabbage butterfly. Yeah. You see these flying around all the time. It's the white and they've got the black spot. Here's what we want to do culturally. Time our harvest to avoid the peak population. So they love the cruciferous vegetables. That's going to be your cabbages, right? Your kale, that kind of thing. We want to plant those very early when the moth has not yet emerged and is laying the eggs and depositing eggs and cute caterpillars all over your vegetables. We can also plant disease-resistant varieties. So, for example, um, in the picture on the left, that's a Savoy cabbage. And what it is it's got those curly leaves and lots of ridges in the leaves. Well, the cabbage moth doesn't like that variety. It would rather deposit its eggs into the smooth-leaved cabbage and kale. And so you can plant that and you'll have less effect from this insect. Mechanically, what we can do is monitor and remove the larva from the leaves. That's in the center photograph. It's not very good focus, but this is kale. This is my garden. That's my thumb there. And that kale leaf, you can see right down the center, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 caterpillars right on there. They blend right in. They just look like part of the leaf. They're actually difficult to find, but when you do, and then your eye is trained to see them, you're saying, oh my gosh, look how many caterpillars I have here. So you just remove them. Biologically, birds, parasitic wasps, and spiders are all natural predators. So we want to make sure we are providing an environment that promotes birds, parasitic wasps, and spiders. Oh, one of our Pacific Northwest favorites, right? Mollusks or snails. We do have some native species, but those aren't the ones that are so bad. It's these invaded species that have come in and been able to just proliferate in our moist environment here, and they've just really taken off. So we've got the European black slug that is also sometimes just brown with that orange bottom. And then we've got the brown banded and the gray field slug. These are devastating to agriculture too. So if you think they're bad in your yard, try a farm when they've just come in and they can just mow everything down. It's unfortunate. So what can we do culturally? Let's reduce their hiding places, right? Pots, rocks, weeds. We want to use drip irrigation and water minimally. Water in the morning. If we water in the evening, they now have a better base to get around and they can get around faster. So we want to water in the morning. Those are some cultural changes we can do. Mechanically, we can create sharp, dry barrier with crushed eggshells, grit, or diatomaceous earth. Some people have applied those things, and those are not chemical. Those are just things that are mechanically hurting the slugs. Shallow containers with beer, those work great also. Trapping them in hiding places like wooden boards. If you put a wooden board out, but you've got to get out there in the morning, because then if you're just hiding here, then you're just providing a hiding place. So you've got to get out in the morning and then remove them. And then you can hand pick them with a flashlight in the dark. That's what I do. I have an alarm in the spring, and it's set for 10:30 because it stays light so late. And I go out with my flashlight and I just pick them up and I put them in a Ziploc bag and dispose of them. Don't throw them over your neighbor's fence. It's not being a good neighbor. But okay, and then biologically, we could encourage frogs. Some ground beetles will eat the eggs. So we just want to make sure we are not applying any chemicals that are going to reduce their natural predators. All right, so we've got insects and mollusks. Now we're going to talk about fungus. Anyone get this kind of fungus on their plants? This is known as powdery mildew, and it's very prolific, especially late August and September. Pretty much everything's got it at this point. But it does go away in the winter, and then it waits and gives you a nice spring, and then it'll come back again next year. So culturally, what we can do, we want to set up drip irrigation and water in the morning so that we keep the leaves dry. Okay. If we have overhead watering, it's going to be much more prone to powdery mildew. And then if we leave it there in the evening, then all night you've got those wet leaves. So improve air circulation. That'd be more for like roses, things like that. We want to don't have roses that are all clumped together, right? We want to prune them and let those leaves have some air space. Assure that the plant has full sun exposure. You're going to get powdery mildew on roses, for example, if that rose is not getting enough sun. If it's got a little too much shade, the plant is stressed, and then the powdery mildew also will be able to attack it, so to speak, in when it's in the shade. So over fertilizing, once again, not a good idea. Those young leaves that are softer are more prone to the powdery mildew. So mechanically, I mean, if early in the season, maybe there's some things you can do. You want to remove the infected leaves and then maybe consider removing the plant. If it's early in the season and it gets powdery mildew, I would recommend removing the plant. So that's going to be like for your zucchini. If you see powdery mildew early, just remove the plant. Biologically, yeah, there is a certain kind of a little tiny lady beetle that's known to consume the fungus, but I wouldn't bank on that. There is a safe and inert chemical application and a morning application of milk. So you do 33, a 1/3 milk to 2/3 water. You apply that to the leaves of an uninfected plant. So this is only a preventative measure early in the season, and this might delay the infection of powdery mildew. So that's there's a question here. Do you compost powdery mildew or do you put it in the garbage? I would say it's so prolific right now that putting it in your compost is not going to make any difference. It's go ahead and just compost it. Yeah. Bacteria. Okay. I don't know. This is that now I'm getting into things that aren't super common. So I will just tell you what this is. It is a common thing, but a lot of people don't know they even have it. So it's known as crown gall. And it culturally, it really affects certain species. Certain species are going to be susceptible. That's going to be your cherry, apple, peach, plum, pear, caneberries. And the soil may be infected with this. So if you plant those susceptible plants in the soil that has the infection, you're going to get crown gall. What you want to do is make sure you are planting disease-free material into disease-free soil. If you had crown gall in a location, I think there's a certain number of years you have to wait before you can plant those susceptible species in that same location again. You want to avoid injuries to the bark, roots, and crown when you're planting. It is kind of ubiquitous. It is around, and so when you cause an injury, then it can come to that spot and injure the plant. Then mechanically, we need to unfortunately have to remove and destroy plants that have large crown galls. Um, when it's practical, if you have small galls, you can prune them out and you have to use sterile tools. There's a very specific way to do this. And so you would write into the Master Gardener Clinic or check HortSense, which I'm going to tell you about in a future slide, to learn exactly how to do that. So that is a bacteria. Okay, a virus. You're not going to guess this one. This is the little cherry virus. Scary for Washington right now. There is no cure for plant viruses. Once the plant is infected, it has the virus, and the only thing that can be done is removal and death of the plant, unfortunately. So, but we do know about little cherry virus, and this is little cherry virus 2. It can be transmitted by apple and grape mealybugs. So there's a insect connection to this virus. So if you prevent and try to control the mealybug, you're going to control the virus. Culturally, there's not much you can do. Mechanical removal of mealybugs is very difficult. And there's not much culturally you can do because they're just everywhere. And if you have a cherry orchard, watch out for mealybugs. I mean, biologically, mealybugs have a lot of predators. Lacewings, minute pirate bugs, spiders, lady beetles, parasitoid wasps. They're all very effective in controlling the population. So we're talking like cherry orchards. They will use these biological applications to try to control the mealybug, which is going to hopefully control the virus. And these are all pictures of those different predatory insects. One of my favorites. I have a lot of deer, not a lot of rabbits, but I know a lot of people who do have a lot of rabbits, and boy, they sure eat a lot. That picture is deer. That's my yard because I have a family of deer that come through all the time. So, and what was the other one someone mentioned earlier? Moles or voles, right? For herbivorous mammals, culturally, what we can do is plant deer resistant plants. Um, I have lavender, won't touch it. Pretty much any herb, they're not going to even touch it. Um, we can fence them out. We can use covers and barriers over a plant, but that doesn't look that good. So for in these examples, in the top photograph, that's an herb garden. They're not going to touch that. And then in the bottom photograph, it's a screen that's built around green beans. So they can't get to that. And that's going to be for rabbits and deer. So biologically, unfortunately, since their predators, their natural predators are gone, and that's why they are such a nuisance and so prolific. Some safe and inert chemical applications might be pepper and onion-based repellent sprays, and that's what you see in the Yard and Garden Center, the deer repellent. So It also repels usually rabbits. Okay, so now we're on to weeds. So let me just real quick, another item on herbivorous mammals. I didn't include this, but over at the farm, we have a big problem with voles. And voles are little, you just call them field mice, but they will tunnel and eat all your vegetables. They love like potatoes, but then they only take a bite out of like half of your potatoes. So anyway, you can cut away that part. But we tried this last year, those vole repellent. It's a sonic beeper, for a better word, and it vibrates the earth. So it goes down. There's a stake that goes down probably about 10 inches, and that goes down. And then it's a solar thing at the top that every minute it goes boop and it beeps, and the pole that's in the soil vibrates. And so it repels them. Not this last year, but the year before, we had horrible trouble with voles. We installed the vole repellent, didn't see any change at first, but then we left it in all winter long and added more and really kept trying. And we have seen a diminishment in the vole activity. So that's just my own personal experience with voles. And then you can just try to crush the tunnels. I don't know what else you can do. You can till, but that's not always that good for the soil. So, okay, weeds. Yay. A lot of us have these weeds in our yard. So, pictured here, we've got some, this is called cat's ear dandelion, the one in the top left. And then below that is holly. Holly is a weed. In the center, the very pretty yellow one, that's I call it butter and eggs. Below that is the English ivy, and then we've got blackberry, of course, down in the corner, and up at the top. Why am I forgetting the name of that? It's a common weed.
Pansy.
Yes, tansy ragwort. So when you're talking about weeds, remember what is a weed? A weed is just a plant that you don't want there. So for example, I have a maple tree in the back, and every spring I get 100 little maple seedlings that come up out of the ground. I don't want 100 maple trees under my maple tree. And so I pick them. Those are, for me, that's a weed because I didn't want it there. So what it's not, though, is it's not a noxious weed. Okay. A common dandelion is a non-native, but it can provide a lot of benefits to the garden. It's not considered a noxious weed. Noxious weeds are different. That's going to be your English ivy, your blackberry. Those things can take over. They are invasive, non-native plants, and they threaten agriculture crops, local ecosystems, our fish and wildlife habitats. So they are very invasive. Now, not all non-natives are considered noxious. For example, the dandelion I just talked about, foxglove digitalis. That's the pretty pink one that grows, and you can ride out the highway 26 to the coast in the midsummer, and you see all these beautiful, and that's not considered noxious because it kind of plays nice. It doesn't take over. So it's a non-native. It is a weed, but it's not a noxious weed. If you want to know what is a noxious weed, you want to check with your noxious weed control board, and you want to find out what's the best method for control. They give you ways how to remove this stuff. Some of these weeds would best be treated with some chemical application, but it describes that in there. Weed identification, though, is key. So, for example, these three plants, I have purple loosestrife, Douglas spirea, and fireweed here. One of these is considered a noxious weed that needs to be removed at all costs. Two of them are native plants that you don't want to remove. So make sure that you're identifying the weed properly. The Douglas spirea is a native, and so is fireweed. So we want to keep those. What can we do about weeds in our own landscape? Never, thank you very much for that. The link for the noxious weed control is in the chat box. We want to make sure that bare soil is never exposed. I'm so fastidious about this over at the farm. Someone will pick a weed, and then the whole root comes up, and now you've got all this disturbed dirt. It's just going to happen that another weed is going to come there unless you cover it. So use either put another plant there or cover it with some kind of mulch, because soil plus our environment equals weeds. Another thing we can do is just kind of embrace a shaggy lawn. If you have weeds growing in your lawn, maintain your height at 2 to 3 inches, and that's going to not let the weeds take hold. A short lawn is going to be more prone to weeds because the weed seeds land there and they now have sun. They don't, and they can take hold. Mechanically, try to hand pick and spade, or spade your weeds to remove the roots and any lateral roots. You can knock them down with a string trimmer, too, also known as a weed eater. For heavy infestations, cardboard, sheet mulching, burning, and other methods may be recommended. Biological, I put none there. People are hiring out their goats these days so that you can, if it's a large acreage, you can have goats come in and they'll eat all your weeds. Talk real quick about mulch because we are talking about weeds. 2 to 3 inches of mulch is going to be so beneficial for your yard. It nourishes the soil because the organic matter decomposes and it gives back the nourishment to the soil. It's going to suppress those weeds. The weeds are not going to be able to come up. And like I said, my favorite type of mulch is arborist wood chips. It conserves water because you don't get evaporation from the soil. And it regulates the temperature of that soil. So that's going to be more consistent, cooler in the summer when it needs to be, and then warmer in the winter. It prevents erosion. So we don't want rain coming and then washing our soil away. So mulch is so good. It's gold. So some general prevention and cultural tips. If you need to relocate a plant to a more appropriate location, it's going to be a prevention strategy. Use disease-resistant varieties. There are some varieties, for example, tomatoes, that there's a bacteria there's a thing called blossom end rot. And there are some disease-resistant varieties that will resist the blossom end rot. So you can sometimes find those when you're having trouble. Change the time of day when you water and the amount you water. Okay. Remove weeds to reduce competition. When a weed is next to a plant that you want, that is competing for all the resources, the nutrients and the water. So you're going to stress your plant out if you let the weeds grow around the plants that you want. Make sure you're applying your fertilizers appropriately and then pruning. For lawns, I have a few tips for those of you who are choosing to keep your lawns. A lawn only needs about 1 inch of water at a frequency of 3 to 4 times per week. So 1 inch per week and then you split that up between 3 and 4 times per week. So you can determine how long it takes to get a 1/4 inch or 1/3 of an inch by you set out a little tuna can and you water, you see if it's 5 minutes, and you can measure and see, okay, I need to water for 5 minutes. You should stop watering by September 1st. That's going to minimize the crane fly larva damage. I don't know how many of you have a lawn that has crane fly larva damage. It's one of those things around here, Pacific Northwest, that is a problem. It's not our native crane fly, but it's an imported crane fly that causes the damage to the lawns. And then some general tips for biological methods. Try to overcome the negative emotions that spiders and wasps evoke and just consider them a gift to your garden. I do understand, people who have children and they don't want their children to be exposed to wasps. And I'm not talking about yellow jackets. I'm talking about paper wasps and mud doggers and things like that. They're very helpful to the garden, and a lot of those wasps are non-stinging wasps. What we want to try to achieve is an insect balance in the garden. So we want to actually support those beneficial insects. Don't use broad spectrum insecticides. For example, neem oil. People just go on and on and on about the benefits of neem oil. Oh, I saw this, so I just sprayed it with a little neem oil. Well, you just sprayed it with a broad spectrum insecticide that's going to kill not only the target pest that you want to kill, but it's also going to kill beneficial insects. Trapping and killing those beneficial insects is also a problem. The traps that we have, a lot of sticky traps, things like that, we end up catching a lot of beneficial insects too. If we leave the leaves on the ground, we are leaving leaves for wildlife. That's where a lot of these beneficial insects will put their eggs, things like that. So we want to kind of promote their ability to do that. As a last resort, chemical. Just remember, the goal is to manage pests. We cannot control and eliminate them. Even organic pesticide is harmful in a sustainable landscape. For example, the neem oil that I just described. Now, down at the bottom, we have this HortSense website, and I'm actually going to switch to that screen. Let me see if I can do this. I might have to stop sharing and then reshare. Do I have to stop sharing? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just stop share, and then I'm going to reshare. Hang on. There you go. Okay. So this website, I'm not sure, Sam, if you can get that into the chat too. Great. This is called HortSense. And what this is it's more than 1,000 fact sheets that are provided to guide home gardeners in the management of plant problems using integrated pest management. And that includes, you start with cultural, then we do mechanical, then we do biological. So in this website, you can then start with a category. Ornamentals, for example, have 421 fact sheets. Fruit trees, small fruits like raspberries. Vegetables, we have 135 fact sheets. Lawns and turf, 31 fact sheets. Weeds, how to get rid of 90 different weeds. Vertebrates, there's our little friend the vole. Other common problems, and then what are some natural enemies and pollinators. This is a wealth of information. You can do a search too on your, it has a search function, like if you know what pest you have. If you don't know what pest you have, then you are welcome to write in to the Master Gardener Clinic, and they will tell you, they can identify what pest you have, and then you can go to HortSense and figure out how to take care of it. Actually, they will send you the link to the HortSense PDF. All right, let me get back to my other presentation. Close that out. All right, that's HortSense. It's a really great resource. All right. So I'm going to talk a little, this is my last slide, resistance to pesticides. This is how it starts. So right over here on the top left, you've got an insect eating a plant, okay? And in this case, it's a mite. First thing you do is apply the pesticide. So you haven't figured out why you have mites. Is the plant stressed? Is there a cultural way to prevent this? Is there a mechanical way or is there a biological way? We've just gone straight to the pesticide application. This is actually very typical mode of controlling pests. Now, what happens is you've got lots of little mites here, and some do die. However, a few will survive. Those survivors have developed a resistance to the pesticide. Those survivors are the ones who will reproduce more mites, and all of them will be resistant to the pesticide. So now when you apply the pesticide, you get no you get no reaction. None of them die, and it makes things even worse. So just a little thing about pesticides. Here's some of my resources that I use to create this presentation. And are there any other questions? I think not.
All right. Awesome.
Oh,
Well,
there was that one question about the wasp. Let me look up here. I'm sorry.
oh, oh, let's see.
So Steve says if I use diluted Dawn soap solution to spray on paper wasps and mud wasps to decrease their flying ability while I knock down their nests, will the soap solution be harmful to the tree seedlings that are less than 4 years old? So the question is will the soap solution be harmful to tree seedlings? And I don't think so. I don't think that is harmful to trees. Now, if you can keep those paper wasps and mud wasps and not knock down their nests, that would be the best thing. But I understand if they're in a location where a lot of people walk by or things like that, they've set up shop where you don't want them. But really consider if you have a lot of paper wasps and mud wasps, they're doing a really great and fabulous job in your garden getting rid of other things that you do not want. So,
Yeah, I was just for that one, Steve, I was also thinking that as long as your like water to soap ratio is pretty good, it should be fine. And like just spraying off your tree with like pure water. If any like large amount gets on the tree, I think you should be fine and avoid any burn on your tree. So cool.
great.
Awesome. Any other questions, folks? No? Okay. Well, Janice, thank you so
You're
much
welcome.
for a great presentation. I'll send out some resources, stuff that was in the chat, and the answers to those. But if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Janice provided her email as well. So yeah, thanks for joining us on a Wednesday night. I hope you all have a great evening. Yeah,
Too.
bye.
Thank you.